My name is Margaret, and at 62 years old, I thought I had already survived the hardest parts of life. I had spent over 3 decades teaching elementary school in a small Ohio town, guiding children through their ABCs and long division, patching up scraped knees, and watching entire generations grow up. Teaching wasn't just a job to me, it was my identity. When I retired early, it was supposed to be a new chapter with my husband Richard. We had plans: road trips across the Midwest, gardening in the backyard, maybe even a winter escape to Florida. But those dreams dissolved the night his heart gave out 4 years ago. One moment he was in his recliner with the newspaper, and the next I was dialing 911 with trembling hands that never stopped shaking. Since then, I've carried on as best as I could. Richard and I had bought our house 30 years ago, a sturdy two-story place with a white porch swing out front. After his death, it felt too big, too silent. My only son, Daniel, offered a solution. "Mom, why don't you just move in with Sophie and me? It'll be easier for you, and Emily would love it too." At first, it sounded comforting. Sophie, my daughter-in-law, was polished, ambitious, always with her nails done and her schedule packed. She worked in real estate, and though we had never been close, I wanted to believe we could become family in more than a name. Emily, my granddaughter, was the real reason I agreed. She was only 14 then, and she still slipped her hand into mine when we walked. She made the empty evenings bearable, so I moved in. I packed away Richard's clothes, boxed up half my books, and took only what I thought I'd need: some furniture, photo albums, and his old leather armchair that still smelled faintly of him. I told myself it wasn't permanent, that maybe one day I'd feel strong enough to live alone again. But as months turned into years, I started to notice the small frictions. Sophie sighed whenever I cooked in her kitchen, as though my pot roast took up too much space. She rolled her eyes when Emily chose to spend Friday nights watching old movies with me instead of going out with friends. And Daniel, well, Daniel had grown quieter, less like the boy I raised and more like a man caught between two worlds. Still, I held on. I told myself families weren't perfect. I told myself Richard would have wanted me to stay close to Daniel and Emily. I ignored the whispers of unease when Sophie brought up future plans that never seemed to include me. By the time I turned 62, I believed I had found a balance: a quiet life, my granddaughter's laughter echoing through the halls, and the comfort of knowing I wasn't alone. But I had no idea how quickly that illusion would shatter. Thanksgiving that year was supposed to be simple. Daniel had insisted on hosting, saying Sophie wanted everything just perfect. I offered to help with the cooking. After all, I'd been making turkeys since before Sophie was even born, but she brushed me off with a tight smile. "We've got it handled, Margaret. Just, stay out of the way." I tried not to take offense. Families change, traditions shift. Still, I spent the morning setting the table, polishing the silverware Richard and I had received on our wedding day. Emily helped me fold the napkins into neat little triangles. For a while, it felt like old times, laughter mingling with the scent of roasted turkey. The guests arrived: Sophie's parents, a couple of cousins, even one of Daniel's old college friends. The house buzzed with chatter. I slipped into the background, happy enough just to watch Emily glow in the center of it all. But then as we gathered around the long oak dining table, Sophie raised her glass. Her voice rang out, smooth and commanding. "To family," she said, smiling as though she owned the very air we breathed. "And to moving forward. This year is about new beginnings." I lifted my glass too, though her words made me pause. Moving forward? New beginnings? Before I could dwell on it, she turned toward me. "And speaking of new beginnings," Sophie continued, her smile sharpening, "Daniel and I have decided it's time for some changes around here. Margaret, we think it would be best if you started looking for another place to live. You've stayed with us long enough." The room went silent. I felt the blood drain from my face. "Excuse me?" My voice cracked despite my effort to steady it. Sophie didn't flinch. "You've been here 4 years. We need our space. It's not fair to keep pretending this is your home. It's time to move on." The clink of silverware echoed. Emily's fork dropped to her plate with a sharp clang. Daniel cleared his throat but said nothing. Nothing. My chest tightened, heat rising in my ears. I turned to my son, desperate for him to step in. "Daniel, I said, my words trembling. This is still my house. Your father and I bought it. How could you let her? But Sophie cut me off, her tone dripping with condescension. Oh, Margaret, let's not make a scene. Daniel and I have already handled the paperwork. This house belongs to us now. You'll have plenty of time to pack after the holidays. The world tilted. My son's eyes darted away from mine, and in that moment I understood. He had chosen her. The silence after Sophie's announcement hung in the air like smoke. My fork was frozen halfway to my mouth, my hand trembling so badly I had to set it down. Around the table, no one moved. I turned my eyes to Daniel, my son. The boy I had raised on my own during the long years Richard worked double shifts, the boy I had carried through fevers and scraped knees. I searched his face for a sign, any sign, that this was a mistake. Daniel, I said, my voice low but sharp, tell me she's joking. He shifted in his chair, jaw tightening. Mom, it's not a joke. Sophie and I have been talking about this for a while. We need our own space. It's best for everyone. Best for everyone? My words came out louder than I intended. Best for who, Daniel? For Sophie? For you? Certainly not for me. Across the table, Sophie leaned back in her chair, arms folded, her expression smug. Margaret, you've been living here rent-free for years. Don't you think that's enough of a favor? The heat in my chest flared. Favor? I nearly spat the word. This is my house. Richard and I built this life brick by brick. You wouldn't have this roof over your head if it weren't for us. Emily's voice cracked through the tension. Dad, you can't do this. Grandma belongs here. This is her home. Her eyes glistened with tears as she looked at me. Sophie's gaze flicked to Emily, sharp as a knife. Sweetheart, this is grown-up business. You don't understand. But Emily did understand. She slammed her hands on the table, startling even Sophie's polished composure. I understand enough. You're kicking Grandma out like she's some stranger. The guests shifted uncomfortably, murmurs rising, but no one dared speak louder than a whisper. Daniel raised a hand to calm his daughter, his voice firm but weary. Emily, that's enough. I stared at him, heart pounding. That's enough? That's all you have to say to your daughter? To me? My voice rose with every word. You let your wife humiliate me in front of everyone and you say nothing? His shoulders sagged. He couldn't meet my eyes. Mom, please don't make this harder than it has to be. My jaw clenched so tight it hurt. Harder than it has to be? I whispered. Daniel, you're throwing your own mother out like garbage. For the first time in my life, I saw him look at me not as his mother, but as an inconvenience. That realization cut deeper than any words Sophie could have said. Sophie reached for her wine glass, sipping it slowly, satisfaction written all over her face. She had won this round and she knew it. But as I sat there, humiliated in front of family and strangers alike, a cold thought settled in my chest. This wasn't over. The days after Thanksgiving blurred together in a haze of shock and sleepless nights. I packed slowly, clinging to every photo frame and dish towel as if the weight of ordinary objects could anchor me. Emily hovered in the doorway more than once, her face pale and troubled, whispering, Grandma, don't go. Please don't go. I held her close, but what comfort could I offer when I had none left for myself? One afternoon, as I carried a box of books downstairs, I overheard Sophie on the phone in the kitchen. Her voice was sharp, professional, the same tone she used when she wanted to close a deal. Yes, the transfer went through. I'm the sole owner now, she said, tapping her nails on the countertop. Daniel signed the papers last week. Margaret won't be a problem anymore. My breath caught. Papers? Transfer? I set the box down with trembling hands and stepped closer. When she hung up, I confronted her. What papers are you talking about, Sophie? She smiled, cool and unbothered. Oh, nothing you need to worry about. Just some legalities. Daniel and I decided it was best to put the house entirely in my name. That way there's no confusion about ownership once you leave. I felt my knees weaken. In your name? This was Richard's house. My house. You can't just... Her smile widened. It's already done. Daniel signed everything. You might want to thank him for that. I staggered back, my chest tight. I found Daniel in the garage, fiddling with a toolbox. Daniel, tell me it isn't true. Tell me you didn't sign the house over to her. He didn't look at me. He just wiped his hands on a rag and muttered, It was the smart thing to do, Mom. Sophie knows real estate. She said it was safer this way. Safer? My voice cracked. Safer for who? For me or for her? He sighed, finally turning toward me, his expression tired. Mom, please, don't start again. This is for the best. Sophie and I need stability. You'll be fine. You can stay with Aunt Helen for a while until you figure something out? My hands shook so badly I had to clutch the workbench. You signed away my home without even telling me. Your father would— Dad's gone, he snapped, harsher than I'd ever heard him. The words hit me like a blow. Emily burst in then, her eyes red from crying. How could you do this, Dad? How could you do this to Grandma? Daniel's face softened for a moment, but only toward her. Emily, I'm doing what's right for the family. No, she whispered, her voice breaking. You're doing what Sophie wants. And she was right. I saw it in his eyes. He wasn't standing by his mother anymore. He was standing behind his wife. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed surrounded by half-packed boxes, the house no longer feeling like mine. Betrayal is a quiet thing at first, just a sharp word, a look away when you need someone most. But when it builds, it crashes over you like a storm, leaving nothing standing. And as I stared at the hollow shell of the life I had built, I knew the storm had only just begun. The morning I left my house, the sky was gray and heavy with winter clouds. I loaded my last suitcase into the trunk of Helen's car, the cold air biting at my cheeks. Daniel stood on the porch, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the ground. Sophie didn't even bother to come outside. Emily ran down the steps, her hair loose, tears streaking her face. She threw her arms around me so tightly, I thought my ribs might break. Don't go, Grandma. Please don't let them do this. I kissed the top of her head, holding her as if I could somehow stop time. I don't have a choice, sweetheart, but I'll always be here for you. Always. Daniel finally looked up. His voice was flat, rehearsed. Mom, this isn't forever. Once you get settled, you'll see it's better this way. Better. The word cut like a knife. Better for who? Not for me, who was leaving the home I had built with my husband. Not for Emily, who clung to me like I was her last safe place. Certainly not for Richard, who would have been sick with shame at the sight of his son turning his back on his own mother. Helen drove me away as Emily's sobs faded behind us. I kept my eyes fixed on the rearview mirror until the house disappeared from sight. At Helen's place, she gave me the guest room. It was warm, filled with the scent of lavender and old books, but it wasn't home. I unpacked slowly, setting Richard's photograph on the nightstand, his familiar smile looking back at me like a memory of everything I had lost. That first night, I sat in bed clutching the leather armchair cushion I had managed to bring with me. The silence pressed in on me, heavier than the winter air. I whispered into the dark. Richard, I tried. I stayed for Daniel, for Emily. I thought I was doing what was right. But now? My voice cracked and the tears came, hot and unrelenting. I cried until my throat was raw, until the pillow was damp beneath my cheek. I had lost my husband, and now I had lost my son. I had no home, no place in the world. For the first time in my life, I felt utterly abandoned, not by strangers, but by the people who should have protected me most. That night, I understood the true meaning of loneliness. It wasn't just being alone in a room. It was knowing that the people you loved had pushed you out, slammed the door, and told you not to come back. And in that moment, I believed them. Helen found me at the kitchen table a week later, hunched over a cup of cold coffee. I hadn't slept much since moving in. The nights were long, filled with memories I couldn't shut off. She set down a folder in front of me. You need to look at this, she said. I frowned. What is it? Your house papers. You told me Richard was careful with everything. Didn't he set up protections before he passed? I blinked at her. The thought hadn't even crossed my mind. For weeks, I'd been drowning in humiliation and grief. He mentioned something. Once, said he'd never leave me vulnerable, but I thought. Helen pushed the folder closer. Stop thinking and start checking. I spent the rest of the day digging through the boxes I had hauled with me, old tax returns, insurance papers, mortgage documents. Finally, tucked between faded photographs, I found the manila envelope Richard had left. His handwriting scrawled across the front. For Margaret, if anything happens. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were legal documents, some yellowed, others newer. One clause in particular caught my eye. The deed to the house wasn't a simple joint ownership. Richard had placed a survivorship condition, ensuring that if anything happened to him, full rights of the property transferred to me, not to Daniel, not to anyone else. I gasped, reading it twice, 3 times. Sophie couldn't have legally transferred the house, not without forging something. Helen leaned over my shoulder. Do you see it? She couldn't take your house, Margaret, not unless she broke the law. The realization hit me like a jolt of electricity. For weeks, I had felt powerless, discarded like an old coat no one wanted anymore. But suddenly there it was, the proof that Richard had kept his promise. He had protected me, even after death. For the first time since leaving, I felt my spine straighten. My tears dried, replaced with a fire in my chest. Sophie hadn't won, not yet. That night, I looked at Richard's photograph on the nightstand and whispered, "You didn't leave me defenseless, did you? You knew." And as the shadows stretched across the walls, I felt something shift inside me. Grief gave way to resolve. I had been cast out, humiliated, betrayed. But I wasn't finished, not by a long shot. The next morning, I called the number on Richard's old business card, the attorney he had trusted for years, Mr. Carter. He was retired now, but his son had taken over the practice. When I explained my situation, they agreed to see me right away. I walked into the office clutching the deed, my palms damp with nerves. Across the desk sat a man in his 40s, clean-cut, steady-eyed. "Mrs. Harris," he said, scanning the papers I'd brought, "you still hold legal ownership of the property. If your daughter-in-law claims otherwise, then she either misunderstood or she committed fraud." The word hit me square in the chest. Fraud. He leaned back in his chair. "If there are forged signatures, we can prove it. And if that's the case, she could face criminal charges. But first, we'll need to gather evidence quietly. Don't alert them. Let them think you've accepted your fate." For the first time in months, I smiled. It was small, but it was real. That night at Helen's, I spread my notes across the kitchen table like a battlefield map. Step 1, gather every document Sophie had filed. Step 2, contact the county records office. Step 3, follow the money. But I didn't stop there. Richard had always told me, never put all your eggs in one basket. If Sophie wanted to strip me of my home, I would take something of equal or greater value from her. I remembered the small family company Richard once invested in, a construction supply business. Daniel had written it off years ago, claiming it went under. But I knew better. I'd kept quiet, holding on to the last shareholder letters that arrived even after Richard's death. If I played this right, I could buy in again, maybe even gain leverage. So I made 2 parallel plans. Expose Sophie's fraud. Quietly, meticulously, with the law on my side. Rebuild my power. Buy back into the company Daniel thought was worthless. If Sophie wanted me powerless, she would soon find me anything but. I closed my notebook, feeling the weight of resolve settle into me. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about justice. For Richard, for Emily, and for me. The following week, I drove to the county clerk's office with Helen at my side. My hands trembled slightly as I filled out the request forms, but inside, I felt steadier than I had in months. The clerk returned with copies of the house transfer documents Sophie had filed. I scanned the pages, my heart hammering. There it was. A signature, my signature, but not mine. Slanted wrong, the letters uneven. A forgery so clumsy I almost laughed. Almost. I tucked the papers into my folder. Evidence, proof, ammunition. That night, after dinner, I made my second move. I called the number on the last shareholder letter from the old construction supply company. To my surprise, the line still connected. An aging accountant answered, his voice raspy but clear. "Yes, Mrs. Harris, the company's not dead. Struggling, yes, but still alive. We're always looking for new investors." I told him I wanted in. Within days, the paperwork was mailed to me. I liquidated part of my savings, sold a few pieces of jewelry I'd kept hidden away, and signed the documents with a firm hand. By the end of the week, I was officially a shareholder, larger than Daniel had ever been. I didn't tell him. I didn't tell Sophie. Let them think I was tucked away at Helen's house, defeated, powerless. But inside, Something had shifted. Every check I signed, every document I filed was a brick in the wall I was rebuilding around myself. One evening, Emily called me from her bedroom, whispering so Sophie wouldn't hear. "Grandma, are you okay?" I smiled into the phone, a smile she couldn't see but might feel. "Better than okay, sweetheart. Don't worry about me. Just keep your eyes open. Big changes are coming." For the first time since being forced out, I heard excitement in her voice. "I knew you wouldn't let them win." "No," I thought as I hung up. "I wouldn't, and soon they'd see exactly what kind of woman they had underestimated." 2 months passed before I made my move. I wanted everything airtight, every signature, every record, every receipt lined up so neatly that no one could wriggle free. When I finally called Daniel and Sophie, I asked them to gather the family for a discussion. I could hear the smugness in Sophie's voice as she agreed, certain I was coming to beg. We met in the same dining room where she had humiliated me on Thanksgiving. Sophie stood at the head of the table, wineglass in hand, smiling like a queen welcoming her subjects. Daniel hovered behind her, uneasy. Emily sat close to me, her hand gripping mine under the table. I laid a folder on the polished oak surface and looked directly at Sophie. "I thought it was time we cleared up some confusion," I said calmly. Her eyes narrowed. "What confusion?" "This." I opened the folder and slid the forged deed across the table. "You filed this at the county office with my supposed signature." Daniel frowned, leaning forward. "Mom, don't," I cut him off. "That isn't my signature. It's a forgery, and here." I laid down the original deed Richard and I signed decades ago, complete with the survivorship clause. Richard made sure this house would pass directly to me, not to you, not to Sophie, me. Sophie's face drained of color, but she recovered quickly, forcing a laugh. "This is ridiculous. You must be mistaken. Clerical errors happen all the time." I slid another document forward, then explained why the handwriting expert at the clerk's office already confirmed it isn't mine. Gasps rippled around the table. Daniel's college friend shifted uncomfortably. Sophie's parents exchanged nervous glances. I wasn't done. I pulled out one last envelope. "And just in case you thought throwing me out would leave me with nothing, allow me to introduce myself as the new majority shareholder of Harris Construction Supply. The company you told Daniel was worthless, Sophie? It's mine now." For a moment, the only sound was the ticking of the wall clock. Then Emily leaned forward, her voice clear and fierce. "I told you she wasn't finished." Daniel's face crumpled with confusion. "Mom, what did you do?" I met his eyes, steady and cold. "I protected myself, the way your father always intended. The way you should have." Sophie slammed her glass down, red wine splashing across the tablecloth. "You think this changes anything? You think a few papers are going to scare me?" I leaned in, my voice low but sharp enough to cut the air. "They're not papers, Sophie. They're the truth, and the truth is about to ruin you." The room erupted. Sophie shoved back her chair so hard it scraped across the hardwood. "This is insane. You think you can waltz back in here, wave some papers around, and undo everything Daniel and I built?" Her voice cracked, shrill, desperate. Daniel reached for her arm. "Sophie, calm down." "Don't tell me to calm down," she snapped, jerking away. "She's manipulating you, can't you see that? She's a bitter old woman who can't let go." I rose slowly, keeping my gaze fixed on her. "No, Sophie, what I can't let go of is my husband's legacy, and you," I pointed at the forged deed still lying on the table, "tried to steal it with a pen and a lie." Emily stood up beside me, her voice trembling but strong. "Dad, Grandma's right. Sophie forged those papers. She lied to all of us. How can you just stand there?" Daniel's face flushed, torn between shame and loyalty. "Emily, please." "No," Emily shouted, slamming her palms on the table. "You made me watch Grandma pack her life into boxes. You let her cry herself to sleep at Aunt Helen's, and you did nothing." Her eyes filled with tears, but her voice hardened. "I'm done watching. I'm choosing her." The words hit Daniel like a slap. His mouth opened, but no sound came. Sophie rounded on Emily, her mask slipping completely. "Ungrateful brat. After everything we've done for you?" "Enough." My voice cut through hers like steel. "You don't speak to her that way." The room went silent again, but this time I was no longer the quiet, humiliated woman sitting at the edge of the table. I was standing unshaken with my granddaughter beside me. Sophie's eyes darted between us, fury boiling just beneath the surface. "You'll regret this, Margaret, both of you." I leaned closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "No, Sophie, for the first time in a long time, I won't." Daniel's face was pale, his hands pressed flat on the table as if he needed it to hold him up. He looked at Sophie, then at me, then finally at Emily. His voice came out unsteady. "Is it true, Sophie? Did you forge her signature?" Sophie let out a sharp laugh. "Oh, don't be naive, Daniel. You think your mother could afford lawyers and handwriting experts without help? She's bluffing. That paper means nothing." I slid the certified report across the table. "Read it." Daniel's eyes scanned the document, his jaw clenched, his knuckles white around the page. This says the signature isn't hers." Sophie snatched the paper, crumpling it in her fist. "So what? Mistakes happen. Are you really going to throw away our marriage over your mother's paranoia?" Emily stepped closer to her father, her voice breaking. "Dad, please, look at me. Look at Grandma. She's not lying, you know it." I watched Daniel's shoulders sag, the fight draining out of him. He looked at me finally, really looked at me, for the first time in months. His lips parted as if he wanted to apologize, but Sophie cut in, her words fast and sharp. "Don't you dare turn on me, Daniel. Without me, you're nothing. Your job? Your connections? Who do you think built that life for you? Certainly not your mother sitting in some dusty classroom all her life." The words hung in the air, ugly and poisonous. Daniel flinched, shame flickering across his face. For a moment, I thought he might still fold under her grip. But then Emily slid her hand into his. "Dad, she doesn't love you. She uses you. Grandma and I, we're the ones who love you." Daniel's eyes glistened, his grip tightened around his daughter's hand. He turned slowly toward Sophie. "Did you ever love me? Or was it always about the house? The money?" Sophie's silence was answer enough. For the first time since Richard's death, I felt the scales tip. The son who had abandoned me was beginning to see the truth. Sophie's mask had cracked, and beneath it was nothing but greed. But she wasn't finished. I saw the steel flash back into her eyes as she squared her shoulders. "If you think I'm going down without a fight, you're all more foolish than I thought." The door slammed behind Sophie, her heels clicking down the driveway until the sound vanished into the night. For a moment, the house was still, as if the very walls were exhaling after holding their breath too long. Emily threw her arms around me, her tears hot against my neck. "You did it, Grandma. You really did it." I held her close, my heart steady for the first time in months. "No, sweetheart, we did it. You stood by me when no one else would." Daniel stood apart, shame pulling at his shoulders. When he finally spoke, his voice was ragged. "Mom, I can't undo what I let happen. But I can promise you this. I won't ever put Sophie before you again." I studied him, my son who had abandoned me yet finally opened his eyes. "Promises are only as good as the actions that follow. If you mean it, Daniel, prove it, not with words, with the life you build from this day on." He nodded, tears brimming, and for the first time I believed he might finally try. I turned, looking around the dining room, the same table where I had been humiliated, now the place where the truth had turned everything upside down. My house, my legacy, my dignity, reclaimed. I squared my shoulders, a quiet fire burning inside me. They had tried to erase me, to write me out of my own life. But tonight proved one thing. I was still here, stronger, unbroken, and I would never be erased again.